Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is the second of my two videos about Napoleon Bonaparte, who, in my opinion, is a great military genius, an enlightened emperor, an ambitious conqueror, and a notorious womanizer. Ever since his time, Napoleon has been the subject of many books, movies, and artworks. As a matter of fact, a new movie with the title Napoleon has just been released in America, and it tells very interesting stories. What I do in my videos is to look at him from a historical perspective, providing you with a little historical background against which he rose and fell. The content of these two videos is largely based on one of my published books, which is entitled Essentials of World History. If you want to know more about him or about the French Revolution, you may want to read this book, which is available on Amazon. If you are new to this channel, my name is Frank Zhu, and I'm a college professor teaching sociology, history, and philosophy. I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. In the first episode, I focused on three aspects. Number one, his rise to power. Number two, his coronation as the emperor. And number three, the so-called Napoleonic Wars. For those of you who missed it, I will leave a link down below. Please make sure you check it out. In today's video, I will talk about two more aspects. Number one, his downfall. And number two, his legacies. There is no doubt that Napoleon was a military genius. During the Napoleonic Wars, the French armies fought almost every European power. He took control of most continental Europe by conquest or by alliance. Napoleon was well trained in military affairs. He knew how to take advantage of modern weapons, especially artillery. His clever and unconventional military strategies often took his enemies by surprise. When he planned for a battle, he often paid meticulous attention to details. His victories were also due to the fact that he had gained the respect of his soldiers through bravery and courage. Of course, he was not without flaws. Many of his extremely ambitious plans were unrealistic, and as a conqueror, he was welcomed in some places, but remained unpopular in others. As a dictator, he was arrogant and egoistic. But the direct reasons for his downfall were two fatal mistakes. First, without a strong navy, Napoleon made a big error in attempting to conquer Britain. Napoleon had been obsessed with invading Britain because he wanted to demonstrate to the whole world that he could succeed where other French leaders had failed. In order to send his troops across the English Channel, he knew he needed first defeat the British Navy. So he ordered his navy to launch a sea battle with the British Royal Navy in 1805. However, Napoleon severely underestimated the naval power of Britain. At the famous Battle of Trafalgar, he was decisively defeated by the British Navy led by Lord Nelson. By the way, in memory of this battle, a public place in central London was named Trafalgar Square. In the middle of the square is a high column with the statue of Nelson on the top. It is one of my favorite places when I visit London. Another of Napoleon's fatal mistakes was his decision to invade Russia in 1812. At the time, Russia was supporting Britain by maintaining trading business with Britain. Napoleon was hoping to force the Russian emperor to stop trading with Britain so that Britain would seek peace with France. In June 1812, his troops crossed Poland and invaded Russia. Though he initially won several victories and forced the Russian armies to retreat, his troops were exhausted after long marches. What was worse was that they were unprepared for the bitterly cold weather in Russia. The French supply lines were also cut by the severe weather. As a result, hundreds of thousands of his troops froze to death or starved in the vastness of that country in winter. By 1813, Napoleon had been defeated by his disastrous losses in Russia and by a coalition of European armies. The defeat by the Russians was a turning point. From then on, he began to go into decline. The French were driven back into their borders. In 1814, Napoleon was forced to abdicate, and Louis XVIII, who was a grandson of Louis XV, assumed the throne of France. Napoleon himself was driven to exile in the island of Elba. However, the ambitious Napoleon would not content himself living on Elba. He was watching for an opportunity. In March 1815, he escaped from Elba. On the way to Paris, he confronted an army who had been sent to capture him, and in a surprising turn of action, he successfully persuaded them to follow himself. He then led them in marching on Paris and seized power again. He immediately started a campaign into Belgium. On June 18th, 1815, his French army fought a battle with a coalition of armies led by the Duke of Wellington at Waterloo, and Napoleon was defeated. It was a decisive battle that destroyed Napoleon's dream to dominate Europe and changed the course of history. Nowadays, the word Waterloo has often been used in a figurative way, meaning that someone suffers a final defeat or failure. Back in Paris, crowds of people begged Napoleon to fight on, but he knew he had lost everything. He planned to go to America, but his visa was never granted. So Napoleon went to Belgium, where he surrendered to the captain of a British battleship, hoping to find refuge in Britain. When the ship docked at an English port, thousands of people gathered on the scene in order to have a look at this legendary genius. The then British Prime Minister William Pitt was afraid of his popularity and decided to exile him to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic Ocean, where Napoleon remained until his death on May the 5th, 1821. How he died still remains a mystery. Although Napoleon was sometimes a tyrant and always an authoritarian, he was, after all, the son of the French Revolution, symbolizing many of the revolution's principles. His influence is everywhere evident in France, even today. Many buildings and constructions in Paris remind people of this great military general and ambitious politician. The most obvious of these is, of course, the Arch of Triumph, at the center of the city, built to commemorate his victories. Politically, his influence pervades every aspect of the French political life, including the constitution in the later years. The country's basic law is still the Code of Napoleon, and the administrative and judicial systems are essentially Napoleonic. Under his rule, the French centralized government for the first time recruited bureaucrats according to their abilities rather than birth or social status. Religious freedom survived. In terms of education, Napoleon's influence is also obvious. For example, a uniform state-regulated system of education still exists today. On the foreign front, Napoleon's wide conquests permanently changed the European map. The radical reforms he implemented in the conquered parts of Europe paved the way for a series of revolutions of the 19th century in Europe. The Code of Napoleon became the basis of the civil law system, which is widely used in modern European countries. By the way, the legal system in the United States is the common law system, which of course was borrowed from Britain. Napoleon was a workaholic. As a power-seeking man, he was never satisfied with what he had already achieved. "Power is my mistress," he said. To get power, he never stopped working. His life can be described as simple. He is said to eat very fast in order to go back to work as soon as he could. He never took delight in good food, fine wine, or lavish living style. According to people who knew him, he only slept 3 or 4 hours a day. He married several times. His first wife, Josephine, was well known in Parisian high society, who helped to promote his career. Josephine was the only woman who could persuade him to do something or change his mind, and he loved her a lot. It is said that the last word he said before he died was Josephine. But eventually they divorced because she could not provide Napoleon with an heir. He went on to marry the niece of Marie Antoinette, with whom he had a son. In his lifetime, Napoleon had dozens of mistresses, most of whom were crazy about him. For these women, Napoleon was both a great warrior and a great lover. But for Napoleon, none of them could interfere with his work. Even during his rendezvous with his mistresses, he would not forget his work. He often demanded that his mistresses wait for him naked in his room. But he often forgot about them, and when he did arrive, he would not linger. It is said that he would only spend several minutes with them, and after it was over, he would immediately go back to work. Militarily, few deny that he was extremely talented. Since the Caesar's time, nobody had conquered more lands than Napoleon. Nowadays, people remember him not as a smart politician, but as an accomplished military general. He used many clever strategies to win one battle after another. In my opinion, he was one of the 3 greatest military generals in human history, the other 2 being Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. With that said, I must point out that, like other military conquerors, Napoleon was a ruthless man who was willing to sacrifice thousands of lives in order to achieve his own goal. Well, that is all that I wanted to talk about today. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.